Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial. Today I will open up a chapter on how to stay anonymous. So there are several ways, several methods that you can use. First off, you've probably heard about these things. They are proxies. So you are just routing your connection through several different points, although this can be very slow depending on the speed of the proxies elsewhere. And you also know nothing of the other side. You know nothing of the servers through which your packets are going. So that can be risky, but then again, if you're just scanning something, if you're nmapping a network, if you're using nmap to footprint a network, why do you care? It's not of importance. However, if you're using proxies to log in somewhere or pass credentials or something of a kind, that is potentially dangerous and you should not do that. I mean, it's quite literally, you shouldn't do it. The other option is to use some sort of VPNs and to encrypt your networks, to encrypt your traffic between you and the VPN service provider. Now, these things can be very fast depending on which one you have, so you can just pay for a service out there. I think a yearly subscription is like $100 and something bucks. A monthly subscription is like $10, something like that. You get a dedicated VPN static IP address, so you can do a lot of stuff, and they can be very fast. Furthermore, your traffic is encrypted, as I said, and the only way that somebody can figure out that you are doing something somewhere is if the VPN service provider actually relinquishes your information. However, this does not happen that often. This is very difficult to attain, especially if you get a VPN in certain parts of the world where they just generally don't give these sort of information out, but I wouldn't recommend doing that for white hat hacking, primarily because there isn't a need to stay anonymous to that extent. What we are going to be using VPNs and proxies mainly for, or what they are mainly used for in the world today, I would say anyway, this is just my personal opinion, is to bypass firewall settings or firewall limitations, should I say. So here's a real life example that people have been using quite often, that people are using pretty much on a daily basis. Netflix, for example, has a certain range of IP addresses from which it allows connections. So if you are elsewhere in the world and you do not belong to that IP address range, it will not allow you to view anything on the site. It will not allow you to see movies or something of a kind. However, if you use a proxy, a good one, or if you use a VPN, you will be able to access the site as though you were coming from the country which falls within the IP address range list. So that's just one of the common examples of what people are doing. Not exactly legal, but well, people have been doing it. It's not exactly harmful or something like that. You're not taking servers down or anything of a kind. But people have been using it in order to be able to watch Netflix from, I don't know, a cell phone when they're traveling or something like that. In any case, there are numerous other examples. When you want to bypass certain firewall settings, primarily you bypass the IP range lists which are allowed to access a certain server or something like that. But also, for example, if you have a certain server whose traffic is mainly generated from a single area, from a single country, and you do not want to be, for example, scanning it from, I don't know, an IP address that belongs to the area in China or something like that, because those IP addresses, they look very differently. I mean, of course, they're written the same, but any network administrator, as soon as they see that IP address of that kind, that is far away from their geographical area, they will know that it's an anomaly of some sort and that it doesn't belong there, and they will be intrigued, they will start looking. So that is not something you want happening to you. You want to be accessing the server from where all the other users are accessing it from, in order to hide yourself in the mass. In any case, that is what we shall be doing in this chapter and a few other things. But for the time being, for this tutorial, I want to show you how you can actually access the dark web, or the hidden web, whichever way you wish to refer to it. Now, the rumor is that the dark web is a lot bigger than your regular internet, that there's a lot more information there, and I use its resources. A lot of people do. There are some very nice forums where you can get a lot of good stuff. So I would definitely recommend trying it out, and you will, at some point of time, you will need it. For that, you will need to install a Tor browser, and with a Tor browser, you will be able to access Darknet. Now, it is not installed by default on Kali, and this is one of those rare occasions and rare situations where we will actually need a different user other than root in order to be able to do anything with Tor, in order to be able to start it. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and create a new user. So just open up your virtual machine. You see mine is already opened up here. I'm just changing the size so that you can see that it's a virtual machine, and I have my terminal up and running here. I can close it and reopen it. There you go. Just open up your regular terminal and type in the following. So first off, we need Tor. I will explain what Tor is in a moment, but you just type in apt-get space install Tor space -y and press enter. With this command that I am highlighting at the moment, Tor will install no problems on Kali as long as you have an active internet connection. It is not installing here because I already have it installed. The following fact, right? Yep, there we go. It says Tor is already the newest version. So it is already installed. It is the newest version. I have deliberately skipped all the verbose installation, the entire verbose installation mode, primarily because you're not going to see anything useful there at the moment, and it's going to waste quite a bit of time. So just type in this command. You will not be prompted for any questions because of the -y argument, and the installation will go through no problems. Let me just go ahead and clear the screen. Now the next thing that we need to do is actually create that user that I have been talking about. So just go ahead and type in the command add user. Just a keynote here. There is also a command user add. Do not use this command for the time being, primarily because I have discovered that it causes some unnecessary complications which tend to hinder us along the way. So just go ahead and type in add user space, and now you can name your user whatever you want. You cannot use capital letters, if I remember correctly. That's the rule in Debian systems. So I'm just going to call my user random. I'm not going to call him random. I'm going to call him, how shall I call him? I'll call him test. Here, my user will be test. And there we go. Now it says adding user test, adding new group test, adding new user test with group test. That's pretty much what has happened here. It has created a home directory for that user. It already exists. What do you know? I have created it previously, but I have deleted it just to make sure that there are no mistakes in this tutorial. But it doesn't matter. If it will say here that the home test directory has been created, and that you will be able to use it. You do need this folder primarily because we're going to be doing stuff there which you cannot do with root. Now go ahead and type in your password here. It doesn't show anything when you type. That's the standard way of Unix passwords in order to prevent anybody from seeing the length of your password on the screen. Very nice. So press enter. Now you are prompted here for some username information, for some information in regards to that user, completely irrelevant for our purpose today. So we do not want to type in the full name, room number, work phone, home phone, other, don't care. Is this information correct? Sure, why not? Press enter, and there we go. We have just effectively created our new user test, to which we need to log, and then from there conduct our work. Now, a key thing to note here is that even though there is a way of configuring the Tor browser to run as root, it's not simple, but there is a way. Do not do that. I mean, do not. Primarily, it's not even a good idea to browse the internet as a root user. You can, if you pick any sort of viruses up, any sort of malicious code, it's going to run as root. So you don't want that on your system. You do not want to compromise it in such a way. And generally on the machine that you are performing these attacks, like this virtual machine of Kali Linux, you don't really use it to browse the internet. For the sake of examples, I sometimes open the browser Firefox, basically Iceweasel, and do some stuff there just to show you the information. Or as you've seen now, I have downloaded from a very specific site. Actually, not now, but in a few moments you will. I will download from a very specific site a Tor browser. So just when you know exactly what you're doing and where you are getting it from, and when you have verification of the source, then you should use it as root, or you can use it as root, but otherwise do not browse the internet as a root user. That's a bad idea. However, we will only use this user, well, maybe not only, but mainly for our Tor browser. Otherwise, we will be using the root user primarily, because you can't do pretty much anything in Kali without the root user. All the tools more or less require these sort of root permissions, as they do tend to access network related things. Anyway, I will cut the tutorial here, and I'll see you in the second part of it. Today I will be talking about how you can configure proxy chains to work in combination with Tor in order to anonymize traffic, not only web browsing traffic, but rather instead all network related traffic generated by pretty much all of your applications. Now there are a few of those which will not work in combination with proxy chains. Namely, one such application is or piece of software is Metasploit. Now, Metasploit is practically a hacking framework, and it is of crucial importance for pretty much any sort of hacking activity in today's world, especially because it allows automated generation of code needed to break a certain system, and it also contains a list of vulnerabilities as well. However, what I want to do here today is show you how you can anonymize pretty much all footprinting traffic or Nmap or traffic generated by Nmap when you're gathering information, or even your web browsing traffic in a different fashion other than using a Tor browser, and how you can cover your tracks in general no matter what you are doing pretty much. So one of the first things that you do need to do in Kali Linux, it comes pre-installed, so you need Tor and proxy chains. These two things you would install on some other systems, Linux systems or Windows systems, doesn't matter. Tor is kind of tricky. I have seen versions where Tor is not installed by default, and I have specified in the previous tutorial, I do believe, how to install Tor, no problems. But yeah, what you would need to do here is simply configure and not install anything. So let's just navigate over to the etc proxy chains configuration file, nano/etc proxy chains.conf. Press enter, and there we go. We are in the configuration file. Let me just expand this actually. And what proxy chains is, well, it gives you an ability to route your traffic through a series of proxy servers and stay anonymous in such a fashion by hiding behind them, or by having them forward your requests so that it looks to the other side that your requests are coming from them as opposed from you. Surprisingly enough, there are a large amount of free proxy servers out there that you can use, but they're not very stable. You know, they go up and down, and they're not very fast. So for specific targets, they can be useful, not for brute forcing, not for any form of brute forcing attacks. But if you are doing something to a certain target, if you're trying to log in or you're already logged in, you can definitely do it through proxy chains, and it will be reasonably fast and reasonably stable as well. But if you're doing some sort of mass scanning, or you're brute forcing a password or something of a kind, proxy chains with a list of proxies selected from the internet, free proxies that is, that's not going to work out. I mean, it's going to work out eventually in a technical sense, but it will consume more time than you can spare. And by more time than you can spare, I mean like a month or two to do a simple scan. So that's not an option there. There are other ways of doing that. But for the time being, I just want to show you how you can use proxy chains, how you can configure it actually, because it's really useful. I use it fairly often. A lot of people do, and it's a fantastic piece of software. So first off, you have types of proxies here which you can use. You have HTTP, SOCKS 4, and SOCKS 5. Now there are fundamental differences between these protocols. You always want to find yourselves a SOCKS 5 proxy, as that is the best possible one that has the ability to anonymize all sorts of traffic. HTTP, well, as the name itself says, it's for HTTP traffic, and SOCKS 4 is very similar to SOCKS 5, but it does not support IPv6 protocol, and it does not support UDP protocol. So this can be, the SOCKS 4 can be rather problematic. You always want to make sure that you're using SOCKS 5 wherever and however. Anyway, down below you have these options which we will go over. So basically how you enable these options, you don't need to type in some complex lines of code or anything of a kind. Basically just delete the hash and that's it. Save the file, the option is enabled. This hash presents a commented outline, meaning that the system reading this file will ignore it if there is a hash. If there isn't a hash, it will take it into consideration and interpret it accordingly. Anyway, what we have here are statements which allow us to specify how we want our traffic to be routed. So first off, we have dynamic chain. Dynamic chain is an option which you will find people using the most. It is most commonly used option, a preferable one, and honestly I think it's the best one, primarily because it's the most stable one. And here's why. Suppose you have A, B, C, D proxies, so those are some servers with IP addresses with open ports, and if you have a strict chain policy like we have here, you will only be able to access any site on the internet in general by going through A, B, C, D. So you have to go through all of them, and you have to go through in that specific order, A, B, C, D. And that's not always a good thing. I mean, if you're paying for 5 proxies, that's not a problem because they will always be operational, they will always be up, and why not? That's not a bad option there at all. However, most people use free proxies and they don't tend to pay for them. Why would you pay for 5-10 proxies for a simple scan or something of a kind? They're not free, they cost money. They're not that expensive either, but still, I mean, the act of paying itself identifies you, and it kind of diminishes the amount of anonymity you have on the net. There are some complex payment methods which you can use to anonymize yourself, but still, it's far simpler to simply go ahead and use dynamic chains. So I'm just going to go ahead and uncomment, and I'm going to uncomment this line. Go ahead down below and comment this line out. So strict chains will no longer be used. I will be using dynamic chains. One more thing to note here is that if you want to use proxy chains in combination with Tor, so if you want to route all of your traffic through the Tor network, not just the web traffic, you must enable dynamic chains. I mean, there is a chance that it will work with strict chains, but due to the instability of Tor nodes, it is highly unlikely. You will need dynamic chains, and that is why I am using them today. Anyway, if you are using dynamic chains, it just gives you the ability to go from A, B, C, D to your desired destination by not having to adhere to any order. So let's say that C is down, you would go A, B, D, and it would work no problems. Even if B was down, you would go A, D, and you would still reach the destination. So as long as one single proxy is functional, it's going to work, and you don't require any specific order to it. Down below you have random chain. Now random chains are in effect basically the same thing as resetting your services. I mean, if you're resetting your Tor, you will be assigned a new IP address. I mean, Tor assigns you a new IP address every 10 minutes or so, anyway, but with the random chain, you can specify a list of IPs, and then you can tell your computer, okay, I want you to connect to this point, and every time you connect, every time you transmit a packet, I want you to use a different proxy. You can do that as well. That's one of the options, definitely. You can say, okay, go use this one 5 times and then change it to another one or something of a kind. There are a lot of options to specify there. Primarily the chain length. Anyway, if we go ahead down below, there's the quiet mode. You don't really need that. Proxy DNS requests. No leak from DNS data. This is very important. You cannot have any DNS leaks. Let me explain to you what DNS leaks are. Even though somebody cannot get your particular IP address, they can get the IP address of the DNS server that you are using. What DNS servers do is resolve domains to IP addresses and vice versa. So for example, if you typed in, I don't know, youtube.com, the DNS server of your local ISP provider will resolve that into some sort of an IP address that the YouTube has, and it will make a request, no problems. You do not want that happening because your local DNS server will be discovered, and that information can be used in order to figure out your personal IP address, and then when that is done, your physical location is pretty much compromised. So that's a no-go. You definitely need proxy DNS here. It might slow you down a bit, but without it, you're practically not anonymous. It's just a matter of time before somebody finds you. If you go down below, oops, we have some other options here, but we're not really interested in them at the moment. What we got here are formats for entering proxies, and I'm gonna leave it at that, and then we'll explain the rest in the follow-up tutorial. But just a keynote before you go into the next tutorial, have a look at these. You don't need to go on the net or read anything about it. Just have a look at the format here, how they are written. This is an example of proxy chains and how you can write them down. And not a bad idea would be to figure out what these last things are here. So you have a type of proxy, you have an IP address, figure out what this number is, what this name is, and what this word here is. I will of course explain all of this in the next tutorial, but just try to figure it out on your own, and then you'll get the answers. It's pretty simple. In any case, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.